What's it like being at a real-life Pokemon tournament? Just like how the Pokemon League and the games and anime that had the stadium filled with screams from the crowd, and now just getting excited with each play, and trainers popping off after a win, it's exactly how you would think a Pokemon tournament would be. Earlier this summer, I had the opportunity to attend one of these tournaments in person, which was the Pokemon North American International Championship, or NAIC for short, in Columbus, Ohio. Now, I am not the best at competitive Pokemon, but I do enjoy watching players duke it out to try and claim the title of being a Pokemon champion. Since I was a spectator and not a competitor, I'm going to be talking about my experience of what it felt like to watch the 4 titles that players were competing in, and some of the bonus stuff that was there as well. And just as a quick disclaimer, I was provided with a free spectator pass by Pokemon themselves to check out the action, so I greatly appreciate that. The NAIC attracts players globally to compete for CP, also known as championship points, to hopefully gain enough to attend the Pokemon World Championship. Worlds is invite only, and this year it was held at Yokohama, Japan. The NAIC was the last qualifying event before Worlds, so everyone and their Fluttermanes were fighting for their spot. The stakes were pretty high, especially for players who were just a few CP away from qualifying. There's 4 titles or categories in the championship series that players can compete in. There's Pokemon Unite, Pokemon Go, the trading card game or TCG for short, and the video game championship, better known as VGC, featuring Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Pokemon Unite is the newest addition to the circuit. It's a free-to-play 5-on-5 MOBA game, so think of League of Legends but Pokemon. I've been playing a bunch of Unite myself since launch and have been flipping between both Delphox and Pikachu, so getting a chance to see some high-level gameplay in person was something I was really looking forward to. The championship season for Unite actually started way back in February and lasts until June for every region. The teams with the most CP in their region at the end of the season secures their invite to Worlds. One thing to note is that this was the first Pokemon Unite regional that was in person here in North America. I attended Worlds back in London of last year, and Unite was in the lineup of titles. And just hearing the crowd scream for either their favorite team, favorite Pokemon, or insane plays at Worlds was something that was also heard at NAIC. The crowd went bonkers for Unite, especially during the finals when there was a bracket reset. The games were so intense and the energy in the audience was so powerful that folks who didn't really play Unite were invested in the games as well. The casters did an amazing job with the play-by-play, and I would love to see more Pokemon Unite at future in-person events. Pokemon Go follows the classic player versus player format. Players battle each other following the Great League format to compete for CP at various regionals around the world. What's really interesting about Go is that it's a lot more technical than most people would think. But Glitch, you just have to tap to win, right? Well, yes and no. I've experienced firsthand just how mindlessly tapping your moves and your shields can cost you a battle. PvP players win battles by utilizing the 4 basic mechanics, which are the fast attacks, charge attacks, shields, and swapping. By using these effectively, you can outplay your opponent, and not only that, but Go even has its own meta. We'll see Shoutout Pokemon, legendaries, Dugong, and even a Toxicroak with a hat in these tournaments. Another thing I saw and can really appreciate about Go's PvP is how much the community rallies behind their players. I saw in action just how passionate the Go audience was for the players on stage, especially during the finals. Watching PvP is always a learning experience for me personally, and it honestly makes me rethink my approach to PvP, so that way I can finally take on those battle requirements to finally level up to level 44. Within the past few years, the Pokemon TCG scene has boomed as far as collectors and players. At NAIC, there were over 2,400 players who signed up for the TCG alone across all divisions. Unlike the previous titles that I mentioned, TCG has 3 age groups for players to compete in, which are the Juniors, Seniors, and Masters division. The quick rundown is that players go through a Swiss round format, which means that everyone in your age division gets paired up with an opponent that has a similar win-loss record. For regional tournaments like the NAIC, Swiss rounds have a time limit of 50 minutes to win a best of 3, and then the top 8 moves on to a single elimination bracket. For finals match, you have a time limit of 75 minutes to win your best of 3. I've been collecting Pokemon cards for a good while now, but honestly, I don't have a lot of experience playing the card game. I know the basics to where I can follow along, but I will say as a spectator who doesn't really play a lot of TCG, it can be a bit hard to follow, especially when these players are moving at a very fast pace with their cards. cards. However, that doesn't take away the experience of watching with the TCG crowd. Like when they would get excited over a Luminian V being drawn from the deck, or the shock that you would hear when the prize cards are being placed down at the beginning of the match. Being with the audience that knows the game inside and out, react to every single move, makes you want to pay more attention and even learn how to play the game. My favorite takeaway from watching TCG was just being in the audience during finals for Masters. Both players were tied 1-1 and the last match ended in 2 turns. It was so quick that I barely had time to register what had happened. After being surrounded by all that energy, I can honestly say that this was by far my favorite moment of watching Pokemon TCG. Now, I honestly believe that VGC is the core of competitive Pokemon. Worlds 2022 in London was the very first and last showing of Pokemon Sword and Shield VGC on a stage of that caliber. And now we're in the era of VGC with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Just like TCG, you also have a Juniors, Seniors, and Masters division that goes through Swiss rounds. The number of Swiss rounds is determined by the number of players and attendance for the tournament. And since this was NAIC, players had to go through a lot to try to make top cut, especially for the Masters division. At the time of the tournament, Regulation D was in effect on Ranked for Scarlet and Violet, but for NAIC, all players had to play by Regulation C, which includes all of the Pokemon in the Paldean decks, minus Koraidon and Miraidon. A lot of my friends were actually competing in VGC, and I was kind of curious to know what types of teams they were bringing to the tournament. The entries varied from a balanced team to a hyper-aggressive one, weather-based teams, and I even heard Symbiosis Florges, which is, that's a new one. That's a new one. I don't think it got very far. Watching all 3 divisions in VGC, you can tell that there was a noticeable difference between Juniors and Masters by what Pokemon were brought and what strategies were being played. There really wasn't too much of a difference between Seniors and Masters, seeing as it's common for Seniors to graduate into Masters as they get older and they usually play by the same meta. My biggest highlight for VGC as a spectator has got to be the finals for Juniors. There were Pokemon shown on stage that you normally wouldn't see in the older divisions, so it was a nice breath of fresh air. Never underestimate the power of Instructor Mangaroo. Aside from spectating the tournament, there were also some side events and activities you could do. There was the Pokemon Center, for which I didn't have a reservation to get into, the Pokemon Play Lab where you can learn how to play the TCG, side tournaments that you can compete in to earn points and redeem for prizes, trading posts where you can trade both Pokemon and Pokemon cards. There were also vendors that sold official Pokemon merch. I actually ended up snagging some Pokemon cards and a giant Lechonk plush. There was even a special mystery gift distribution event during NAIC for Paul Chua Shiny Arcanine, who was the winner of the EUIC back in February. And Pokemon Go had activations as well, such as special Pokestops, raids, and even spawns such as Shiny Turtonator and Mega Sableye being introduced into the game. One really cool thing that happened at NAIC was meeting up with my friend, that guy in a beanie. This man brought a GameCube setup for distributing the bonus disc Jirachi from Pokemon Coliseum and the Eon ticket for Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Those 2 specific mystery gift events were something that I missed out on when I was a kid, so getting these in my games almost 20 years later meant a lot to me, seeing as 3rd Gen is my favorite generation. Now, whether you're an aspiring competitor or just a Pokemon fan, I highly recommend checking out one of these tournaments. The energy that you feel being surrounded by Pokemon fans is something special that you really can't get anywhere else. As of recording this, Pokemon Worlds in Yokohama had already happened and the circuit for 2024 is already underway. With the Teal Mask already out and Indigo Disc on the way, Pokemon Go having the Paldean decks, Unite continues to expand the roster, and the TCG EX mechanic returning, I'm extremely excited to see how the next competitive year unfolds. And if you made it to the end of this video, please consider subscribing. I want to use this channel as a means to share my Pokemon experiences and adventures. Also, the majority of the music you heard in this video was either made or remixed by me. You can check that out on my Patreon. If you've ever been to a Pokemon tournament or event, let me know down in the comment section below, and thank you again for watching the video.